it that thousands of people with incurable conditions like Parkinson's, MS and dementia are being told by the Department of Work and Pensions that some of their personal independence payments are being stopped because they're getting better. Let me tell you about these conditions. Parkinson's affects the brain. It develops when cells in a part of the brain stop working properly. It's progressive, which means the symptoms, tremors and slowness of movement, will gradually get worse. Dementia describes a set of symptoms that may include memory loss and difficulties with thinking, problem solving or language. It's progressive. It's also incurable. MS, multiple sclerosis, is a neurological condition that affects the nerves in the brain and the spinal cord. Symptoms include fatigue, stumbling, slowed thinking. It's progressive and also incurable. This programme has discovered that many of those with these conditions applying for the mobility element of personal independence payments are having their awards reduced, sometimes to zero, something that charities and patient groups have told us should never happen. The government says that assessments are carried out by qualified health professionals and overall, more people are getting the highest level of support. Jim Reid has this exclusive report.
It took my independence away totally. It was hard, yeah. It was horrible.
I instantly knew that the system is simply broken. How can they tell me that I'm better than I was?
Hundreds of thousands live with an incurable disease, an illness that can only get worse. Many rely on the state to pay for the extra costs of getting around. But this programme has learnt that for many, that support is being taken away.
It's like having a really bad dose of flu and you can't move like you normally do. Some days are better than others, some days I'm much more mobile.
Diane Barrett has lived in South London all her life. 8 years ago, she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Diane has difficulty walking, but when she's on the right medication, she can drive short distances.
I did mention to my family I was a bit worried because I'd heard of people losing their mobility part of their allowance and losing their car. All my family said, well, that won't happen to you because you've got a debilitating disease that's not going to get any better, it's only going to get worse. And I was absolutely gobsmacked when the letter came.
There's a lot of paperwork involved.
I know, it's not...
For 7 years, Diane receives disability living allowance, but DLA is slowly being phased out, replaced by the Personal Independence Payment, or PIP. The idea is to base the amount you get not just on the disability, but how it affects your everyday life. The switch means everyone has to be reassessed. Diane was told her needs had changed, and the amount she received for getting around fell from £57 a week to zero.
Without the mobility allowance, I couldn't have a car because I haven't got any extra money.
And how did that impact your life?
Totally. It took my independence away, totally. Without a car, there's a little hopper bus around here, but I find it really difficult getting on and off. And they don't wait for you to sit down and to move, and I've fallen a couple of times, and things like that. So I was really nervous. And it made me realise how bad my Parkinson's was. So also it was quite depressing, because with Parkinson's you can get a bit low sometimes.
So Diane had to give up her old car. She asked for the decision to be reconsidered and lost a second time. 6 months later, she took it to a full appeal in front of a judge. The tribunal took just 10 minutes to decide the government was wrong.
I burst out crying, and so did my son, because I think we were just so relieved. He was relieved for me because he knew how it had been so stressful. And I think I was just relieved it was over, really. And I felt that somebody was listening to me, and believing me, really.
Well, the government would say, we're spending much more as a nation on things like disability benefits, and it has to run these checks in order to make sure the right people do finally receive it.
Yeah, I agree. They do have to check. But I think straight away, that when they look at a paper, they can see if someone's got Parkinson's, dementia, MS, any ongoing things, you're not going to get over it. It's going to get worse.
To qualify for a car under the government's mobility scheme, you have to receive the highest rate of PIP. It also gives you other rights, a disabled badge and free road tax. But faced with that growing bill for disability payments, the government has been tightening the rules. Critics say the assessment process is also more demanding. Freedom of information requests for this programme show the effect this is having on people with incurable conditions. Under the old DLA scheme, 82% of people with Parkinson's were receiving the full payment. Under PIP, that's dropped to 40%. It's the same basic pattern with other diseases like multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis. The government says that overall more people receive the highest rate of support under PIP, and more people with MS, osteoarthritis and Parkinson's are receiving the highest rate for daily living expenses. That wouldn't include the mobility allowance. People who lose a car can get extra help to buy their old vehicle outright, though that is paid for by a charity rather than the government. At Parkinson's UK, they have now set up a dedicated team to deal with benefit cases. The charity says people with a degenerative disease already on the highest level of support should not have their needs constantly reassessed.
The experience of going through an assessment is extremely stressful. I mean, people with Parkinson's go to so much trouble to appear well and take the medication and get up so early in the morning to get to these assessments. And then because they appear well on that day, the assessor often says, well, you know, you don't look ill, you don't need that support any longer.
The latest figures show the numbers appealing a decision are ballooning. There are now more than 6,000 full tribunals every month. A large proportion, 65%, have their decision overturned by the judge.
It's shocking, frankly, that 2 in every 3 PIP decision that's appealed is successful. It's great that those decisions are then overturned and people are getting the levels of support they need, but we shouldn't be in a position where people have to rely on the appeals process to get that support in the first place. People should be able to expect that the first decision that they get will be the correct one.
The government says PIP assessments are carried out by qualified health professionals. Decisions are made following consideration of all the information provided by the claimant, including supporting evidence from their GP. We first met Wendy Mitchell last year when she appeared in a film about early onset dementia.
I'd forget the most silly of words, and that was when something hit me that it wasn't quite right. My life has changed simply from the fact that I had to retire. I probably was able simply to talk about anything and everything, but now I have lots of notes.
Wendy never received DLA. She was one of the first to be moved straight onto PIP after her diagnosis for Alzheimer's. Under the current system, she still has to be reassessed every 18 months. When her latest decision came through, she was told her needs had changed and her entire benefit would be cut from £77 a week to nothing.
You simply use it to live. It enables you to continue to live independently. That's the whole purpose of the benefit itself. It enables you to continue to live in your own home.
Official statistics show that overall under PIP, more people with dementia do now appear to be receiving the higher rate of payments. But critics say that's not the full story. The Alzheimer's Society says it's received at least 250 calls from people having problems with the benefit over the last 18 months.
I don't remember the content of the interview, but I remember feeling that I wasn't there very long and the person didn't ask me many questions to help me remember what I was supposed to be saying.
So did you feel they had an understanding of your condition at the end of it?
No, I felt that they totally lacked any knowledge of dementia whatsoever. And then I got the shocking letter that told me that I was no longer going to get any payment whatsoever, and a list of all the things that I was apparently better at than I was 18 months previously. which was ridiculous. I wish I was better. Who wouldn't when they got dementia?
When you received that letter, what went through your head? How did it make you feel?
Oh, well, it just makes you feel so demoralised. I instantly knew that the system is simply broken, because how can they tell me that I'm better than I was when I've deteriorated?
Since we filmed, Wendy has lost a first review of her PIP decision and has decided a full appeal at tribunal is too much to go through. A group of charities is now calling for ministers to scrap unnecessary repeated reassessments for people living with diseases like dementia and Parkinson's. The government says the PIP system is better than the one it replaced, and overall it's spending more on disability benefits every year.
As you'd expect, we asked the Department for Work and Pensions for an interview, and you guessed it, they said no, but in a statement they told us PIP assessments are carried out by qualified health professionals who combine their clinical knowledge with an understanding of the fact that not everyone with the same disability is impacted in the same way. Decisions are made following consideration of all the information provided by the claimant, including supporting evidence from their GP or medical specialist. If you've been affected by a reduction in the mobility bit of your personal independence payment, do let me know, because we are going to talk to a Conservative MP later on in the programme at about 11:15. Thousands of people living with degenerative conditions like dementia, Parkinson's and MS are losing part or all of their disability benefits after being reassessed and told that their health is improving. This programme has learned that many of those with incurable conditions applying for the mobility element of personal independence payments are having their awards reduced, something that charities and patient groups have told us should never happen. The government says that assessments are carried out by qualified health professionals, and overall more people are getting the highest level of support. We brought you Jim Reed's full report earlier. Here's a short extract.
It's like having a really bad dose of flu and you can't move like you normally do. Some days are better than others, some days I'm much more mobile.
8 years ago, Diane Barrett was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. She has difficulty walking, but when she's on the right medication, she can drive short distances.
I did mention to my family I was a bit worried, because I'd heard of people losing their mobility part of their allowance and losing their car. All my family said, well, that won't happen to you because you've got a debilitating disease that's not going to get any better, it's only going to get worse. And I was absolutely gobsmacked when the letter came.
There's a lot of paperwork involved.
I know, it's a nightmare.
For 7 years, she received disability living allowance, but DLA is slowly being phased out, replaced by the Personal Independence Payment, or PIP. When she switched, Diane was told her needs had changed, and the amount she received for getting around fell from £57 a week to zero.
Without the mobility allowance, I couldn't have a car because I haven't got any extra money.
And how did that impact your life?
Totally. It took my independence away, totally.
Like around 6,000 people a month, Diane took her PIP decision to a full appeal. The judge at the tribunal took 10 minutes to decide the government was wrong, and Diane eventually received a new car.
I burst out crying, and so did my son, because I think we were just so relieved. He was relieved for me because he knew how it had been so stressful, and I think I was just relieved it was over, really.
Faced with a growing bill for disability payments, the government has been tightening the rules. Under the old DLA scheme, 82% of people with Parkinson's were receiving the full mobility payment. Under PIP, that's dropped to 40%. It's the same basic pattern with other diseases like multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis. The government says that overall, more people receive the highest rate of support under PIP, and more people with MS, osteoarthritis and Parkinson's are receiving the highest rate for daily living expenses. That wouldn't include the mobility allowance. We first met Wendy Mitchell last year when she appeared in a film about early onset dementia.
I'd forget the most silly of words, and that was when something hit me that it wasn't quite right. My life has changed simply from the fact that I probably was able simply to talk about anything and everything, but now I have lots of notes.
Wendy never received DLA. She was one of the first to be moved straight onto PIP after her diagnosis for Alzheimer's. Under the current system, she still has to be reassessed every 18 months. When her latest decision came through, she was told her needs had changed and her entire benefits would be cut from £77 a week to nothing.
I got the shocking letter that told me that I was no longer going to get any payment whatsoever, and a list of all the things that I was apparently better at than I was 18 months previously, which was ridiculous. I wish I was better. Who wouldn't when they got dementia?
A group of charities is now calling for ministers to scrap unnecessary repeated reassessments for people living with diseases like Parkinson's and dementia. The government says the PIP system is better than the one it replaced, and overall it's spending more on disability benefits each year.
Let's talk now to Laura Weatherly, who's from the MS Society. Richard Graham is a Conservative MP and member of the Work and Pensions Committee. And John Stillitz is here. John has MS and severe difficulty walking. He's appealing against cuts to his mobility benefits. Welcome, all of you. Richard Graham, can you tell me how it is possible for someone with a progressive condition, i.e. one that's getting worse, like MS or dementia, to apparently get better?
I think the general idea behind moving from DLA to PIP was to try and focus getting the money on the people who needed it the most. So
I'm asking you how a degenerative condition
I agree.
Can get better.
I agree. It can't on the whole. Sometimes it can stabilise, so it should stay the same. But where it's deteriorating, in theory, what should happen under PIP is that people should get more money as it progressively gets worse. Yeah. But there are cases where, you know, this doesn't happen well, the process falls down, and that's why the appeal system is there.
Anybody with MS, dementia or Parkinson's, whether they're stabilised or not, it's just going to get worse. I mean, don't you think you're on the wrong side of the moral argument here?
I think every situation is genuinely different. Individuals are different. I've been through this myself because my mother had dementia for a long time and eventually died of it. And that's why you've got to have some form of assessment by people who are knowledgeable, who understand the diseases.
Are you sure they're knowledgeable? Because they keep making mistakes. 65% of people are getting their original decision overturned on appeal.
Well, the DWP tells me that 6% of people eligible for PIP appeal, and about 3% of them are successful. And that every individual, like John, who's appealing, is one too many, but at least there is a system there, and the numbers are not that high in overall percentage terms.
I mean, it's just no consolation to say at least you can appeal. Wendy Mitchell, who you saw in our film, is so demoralised by the whole process. She's clearly getting worse. She appeared on our programme 18 months ago. We're not health professionals. We can see she's deteriorating. She says, I'm so demoralised, I cannot go through this appeal. I can't do it.
Yeah. Look, in that situation, you know, I would strongly advise her to go to her MP for help.
Why should she have to?
Well,
she's got dementia.
Yeah.
She's getting worse.
Yeah. Sure, but listen, politicians aren't responsible for the assessments. You've got to have a system.
They're responsible for employing
somebody,
the assessors and putting the criteria in place.
Indeed. So you've got to have a system where somebody decides whose case is the most serious, who deserves the most money. No system is going to be perfect, but if this is not working as well as it should do, then clearly we've got to make it better. Now, there are some things I think that can be improved. So, for example, at the moment you have different assessments for PIP and for the work capability assessment. I don't see any reason why those can't be merged so that you only have one assessment, which would reduce the amount of stress for individuals involved. There's another aspect to it about mobility, which is at the moment, if the assessors decide you're not eligible for the maximum mobility allowance, and therefore your car from Motability will be taken away, you're given 7 weeks before that car is taken away.
Okay.
Doesn't give you enough time to have an appeal and maybe keep your car. And I think that's something the government should look at.
Or maybe don't take the car in the first place. It happened to you, John. You've had your mobility car removed. How does that impact on you?
Sorry, just to correct, I was in touch with the Motability people. They were really helpful. I told them I was going through the appeal process, and I have to say they were very good in saying to me, keep me informed, keep us informed, best of luck, basically. But we're obliged to send out the standard letter from the computer to say we will, you terminate the agreement.
Right. But you're a proud man. How does it make you feel having to go through this?
It's, to say it's humiliating, it is, I mean, I understand there is a need to have a system, but my condition is progressively going to get worse, and I know that if I have the opportunity for another car, it'll probably be one that I need to ramp so that I can put a scooter into, so that I can keep my mobility wherever I go. It is frustrating, it is embarrassing, because you're pouring your heart out almost, you know, to some total stranger who comes in and then does not record things accurately. So that I do feel extremely frustrated, and you've highlighted cases.
Laura, I've hardly left you any time, but how big a problem is this?
This is a really big problem. So MS affects over 100,000 people in the UK. It causes symptoms that affects how people think, see, move and feel. And what we've estimated is that over 1,000 people with MS have already had their mobility support downgraded since the introduction of PIP. And really we think that's down to a number of things that aren't making sense in the system. So first of all, the criteria have changed from DLA to personal independence payment, and we're calling on the government to increase the criteria for mobility support under PIP to really adequately reflect those barriers.
Just to read this statement, finally, from the DWP, decisions are made following consideration of all the information provided by the claimant, including supporting evidence from their GP or medical specialist. Sorry for not giving you more time, but I appreciate you coming on the programme, John. Thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for your time as well.